Thank you very much for joining us today. Our subject is the question of home, which of course can mean very different things to different individuals. And with that, I feel truly blessed to have three great individuals who will be joining us today and talking about the subject. We have Elsa, Jana, and Michael, not necessarily in that order. And what I would like to do, they can describe themselves much better than I could in any feeble attempt, that they would briefly describe themselves to all of you. And I gave them all a special assignment. And so I would ask you all to piggyback after you've finished your description of yourself with whatever your conclusion was tied to the assignment. I won't lead on to anything more from that, but I'd say, Elsa, if you can go ahead and start with you, that'd be great.
Oh, you would do that to me, wouldn't you?
Of course, we stay consistent.
Yes, it's a great honor to be here with some new friends, I hope, and with Michael that I know fairly well by now. So I'm Elsa. I'm originally from South Africa. I moved to Australia and found it quite difficult to adjust initially. And now, after 25 years, I call myself an African Australian. It's difficult to find obvious connections between the two places, and yet I have found home in both. I still miss Africa very much, and I have my own special way of connecting back to that home, which will probably come up later in the program. But the one big thing about Africa is that people actually speak to each other and they care about each other. And I expected it to be very similar in Australia, and I found it very different. People are very friendly, but they don't really open their homes to you. And that was a huge adjustment for me. And the word home features very strongly. I don't see myself really as a very social. I'm not at all social, but I enjoy connecting with people, with individuals. And so it's been up to me to find that home again. I brought my family with me, and one big thing, of course, is that your family is your home, and wherever your family is, you make a home. But it extends from there, and your home becomes wherever you feel comfortable. And I find the strong smells and colors on both continents, and I'll call it Africa more so than South Africa. So the continents, those strong smells, colors, the rather harsh vegetation, all of that is now almost seamless to me. And when I'm on the other side, when I'm in Africa, I feel at home. When I'm here, I feel at home. And I find that it's just the vividness of it that makes it feel like home. As white, as you can see, South African, I obviously come from a strong European background. So my ancestors were Irish, French, German, and Dutch. And with that, you would expect me to connect very strongly to Europe. And yet, when I love going there, but I don't really connect with that because it seems almost too curated and too sophisticated, if that makes any sense. After a while, I need a break. It's almost like too rich meal for me. And having said that, I'm going to hand over to Jana, who is from Germany. And so you can maybe connect with that.
You're on mute. Thank you.
I'll cut that out, don't worry.
Thanks, Mike. What you said, I really connected with it. Listening to you, I felt a lot of similarities between us. But I'll start from the beginning. My name is Jana, 27. I'm a graphic and web designer based in Vienna. But as you said, that's correct. I'm originally from Germany, and before I moved to Austria, to Vienna, I was living in the United States for 2 years, which was also an interesting experience. But since I'm self-employed since last year, I had the opportunity to travel a lot because my job just allows me so, and to see and meet a lot of people, a lot of different cultures. And I really, really liked the topic of today, because I think home is such a big thing. And I've been reading this article, and it said, there was one line where it says, I wrote it down actually. It said, when we feel home, we wear existence like a comfortable sweater. And I really connected with that, because home for me is such a strong feeling. And if we look back even to ancient cultures, we see they built temples and they built homes for themselves, because they kind of tried to form an identity, or they formed an identity, and they wanted to make it accessible for other people and for all the generations to come. And even now, like so many years later, we look at that and we can get a feel of their feeling of home. And I thought that was really, really nice. I've been also thinking about when I was a kid. I've been really passionate about drawing. And I also have a big family, come from a big family, and all my siblings and my cousins are younger than me. And I just love to sit down with them. And my cousin also loves to draw. She's been 5 years old, and we've been drawing, and she's been always drawing the same thing. She's always been drawing a house. I think it's really interesting how for kids, when they play, even, they play wife, or they play family. And for them, it's like home is like a place of order and routines, and they cook and they teach. It's so many things. And there's this, right now I'm preparing actually to move to the UK, and there's this saying that says, as safe as houses. And a home should always be a place where you feel secure and protected. And I think we can all connect to that, especially in times like these, where the COVID situation kind of shook up all of our lives. And it's really interesting to see that people move back to the idea, or let's say, for example, they ask themselves before anything else if it will be safe, if they will be safe, before they ask themselves if the experience itself will be enjoyable. So we kind of move back to this feeling of security. And I think that's really a thing I've been thinking a lot about. And at this point, I give the mic to Michael. See what he thinks about that.
Okay. I'm Michael. I am originally from Canada. I grew up in Toronto. I left Canada in 1987 and moved to the States. I lived in the States, two places, Rochester, New York, a nice place to be from. I wouldn't want to live there for forever. Lived there for 7 years, and then lived 22 years in Connecticut before arriving now where I am in Vienna in 2015. when we were talking before this about home, and then even Elsa, when you made some comments in your opening remark, for me, home has always been where I am. Probably more so, particularly since I was married and had children and things of that nature. But yet, I know if I travel back to the US or I travel back to Canada, there's a comfort, there's a familiarity. Even if I don't necessarily know the area that I'm in, there are certain characteristics, whether it's the way the road is built, or the buildings, or the gas stations and the convenience stores, that are just what I am familiar with. And so, particularly if I fly from Vienna to the States, to New England, where I lived for so many years, it's very comfortable. Recently, back in April, I was back in Toronto for the first time in 6 years, and staying with my brother, who had recently moved and was actually living fairly close to where we grew up in Toronto, and took one of the days I was there and actually walked through the neighborhood. Both my parents are dead now. My father passed away in 2000 and my mother in 2013. And it was really the first time that I'd actually walked by the house, and not just the house, but the park that was around the corner that we grew up, that was a key part, and all the areas that we used to frequent as in growing up. And it was very interesting. It was a lot of memories, a lot of things of that sort of anchor came back, which is is there, but no longer there, if that makes sense. So it's, but I also grew up as a first generation Canadian, because my father was from Ireland and my mother was from the United States. And so the concept of moving, if that's the right thing, right word, has always been something that I grew up with, in the sense of, you go where opportunity is. You don't let, my parents always said, don't let us be an anchor, or don't let us be something that's going to prevent you from growing and taking opportunity. So it's a different thing. For the question that Mike said with regards to the senses, I suppose one element of that walk through the park was a sense of sight, but the other part is probably food. And it is, no matter where you go in the world, there's sort of those comfort foods or things that you have when you grow up, or part of that always associate. And mine is a very silly one, but it's one that is still yet, and probably quintessential, or one element is quintessentially, certainly American, but probably North American, and that's peanut butter. And the other part of that is something that's actually very difficult to find here in Vienna, is a very bland cracker called a saltine cracker, which is a square cracker. I've happened to found the closest thing at the bio marked in Dens, which is not quite right, but it has to do. But peanut butter on crackers and a glass of milk at the end of the day, that's
That's nice.
And it's just one of those things. It's part of, I've since a child I've eaten these things, and it's still part of the end of the day sort of ritual. But it was interesting arriving here. There was two things. One was finding all of the appropriate ingredients to make that, and the second was Macintosh apples. A Macintosh apple is, in my opinion, one of the best apples. It is best eaten very early, or as soon as they're coming off the trees in September, because they're extremely tart. They're extremely tart. Almost you bite it and you go, oh, but it was funny for me arriving here. I'm not sure it was the first fall or the second fall. It's like, I can't find these. They're just not here, right? They weren't available here in Vienna. Certainly in the regular grocery store, just wasn't there. So it's interesting for me. Some of those things is really around food, and maybe very common, what are otherwise very common items, not some fancy restaurant or anything like that, but some very, very just sort of common and simple. So I don't know as to if that resonates with either Jana, yourself, or Ilsa as to
Almost.
Maybe, oh, sorry, if I can just quickly interject. It's something I had not thought of, certainly in this millennium, but my father used to put ketchup on everything. And one of the things he would put ketchup on were fried eggs, which it sounds like one of the most repulsive things in the world. And of course, thank goodness that was not a habit that I continued on. But I have a brother who's over 60 years old, and he still puts ketchup on his eggs. Sorry, I'll go on. Jana, please.
It's funny that you say the thing with the eggs, because my granddad, my grandfather, has just been the best person. He's not alive anymore, unfortunately. He died fairly early. But every time I think of home, I also think of him. He's just been this amazing person, very kind, very caring, and he also had this thing with his eggs. He always ate eggs in the morning. My grandma prepared it, and he also always put Maggi on it. I don't know if you know that, actually. It's this really disgusting spice, actually. That's like a sauce. It's like kind of like soy sauce. It's disgusting. And the thing is, you should really not eat that. Honestly, you should just not eat it, because it's really not good for you. But everywhere I move, and let it be United States or here or wherever I am far from home, I always have to have Maggi with me. It just reminds me. It's just a connection that I have with this. Just reminds me of him, and we ate eggs together, and yeah. So I really connect with the food part, most definitely. Yeah. What about you, Elsa?
Yes, for me, the smell of cinnamon is something that really brings it home, because in South Africa, a lot of the so-called South African foods actually come from the Malay slaves that were brought out by the Dutch. And so they just appropriated all the food as well. And so lovely cinnamony smells on things like milk tart, which is very similar to the Portuguese tarts, custardy type of tarts, but very cinnamony. And they would also put cinnamon on pumpkin and so on. And so when I smell cinnamon, that to me immediately says South Africa, even though it isn't very South African. And I think they've taken that across the whole of the continent there. There's a lot of spices and beautiful colors as well. That bright pumpkin color, also in the sweet potatoes and so on. I just love that, the vividness of it all.
Yeah, I completely understand that.
Mm.
It's crazy how our brain works, actually, and how our different senses send us certain, or bring back the feeling of home. Like, even sometimes I walk through the city and my nose picks up the smell. It just reminds me, brings up certain memories of home. Or if someone wears a specific perfume, it just immediately reminds you, and you connect. And sometimes you don't even know what it is, but you get a certain feeling, and then you start searching for that little memory that you have. But home is also is this warm feeling that gets you and just makes you feel good. I also really connected with what Michael said about wherever he is, there is home, because you just make it your home, you make it your own. And I also feel like this because I remember when I was younger and I started to think about what I want to do with my life and where I want to be in the world. And I always knew that I had to leave because I'm from it's a very rural town, small town in the middle of Germany. And I really had a great childhood. I grew up with a lot of animals, like it's been really great. But I always wanted to see what's out there and what can I do. And I was always interested in different cultures. And moving for the first time I moved to the States was completely new, of course, because I've never done that before. Completely started a new life. And I felt it was really great. I really connected with the people. And I think the people also make you feel home, because you make certain connections and you share these moments with these people, and you make it your home in that kind of sense, if that makes sense. So wherever I went, it sometimes took me a while, especially it was difficult with Austria. And that's also something I picked up from Elsa, like the European culture sometimes. So especially moving to Austria felt it was difficult for me a little bit because, just people are different. In the States, they made me more open and outgoing, as it seems. And here I feel like people need a little bit more time to open up. And I realized at the beginning I was not very happy, but it was my own, I kind of put it on myself because I was not open, because I didn't feel, at the beginning, I didn't feel immediately at home. So it took me a while actually to kind of change my mindset. And then I was able to start to feel home. And so now it's like, if I go home to Germany, I feel home. Coming back to Vienna feels like home. It's completely different. If I would go to the United States, I would feel home. But it's all a different kind of feeling of being home. But I really enjoy all of them.
How much of home is familiarity? Because I think I know what you're or connected. So I have found that takes, having moved, so when I grew up in, like I said, I grew up in Toronto. I went away to university in Ottawa. After I finished my undergraduate, then I moved to the United States. Then I moved to Rochester, New York, then to Connecticut. Then we moved here to Vienna. And what I observed is it takes about 2 years, or at least for me, it takes about 2 years to get over that initial phase. When you don't know where things are, you don't really know how to get around, or you don't know the system, or all. The friend group may not be there, and so there's this period of unsettled that, at least personally for myself, is that you're going through, and that after about 2 years, it's like, okay, now when someone says, "Oh, I live here," or "Can I meet you there?" It's like you're not going, "Oh God, where the hell are they?" Right? You start to know how to navigate the system, and it becomes much more comfortable. I don't know. This is one of the things I've observed. It's over my lifetime of moving and going to different places. But I do. I mean, if I am away and I arrive back in Vienna in the airport, and I'm taking the S7 or whatever in from the airport, it's familiar, it's comfortable, it's no longer, it's the same if I fly into JFK or Newark and I'm now driving up to Connecticut or whatever. I know the roads. I don't even have to think about how, even though I haven't been there for a number of years, it's comfortable. I know where the traffic jams are going to be. I know that there's no good food along the road. So
Yeah, definitely.
Did you find that that happened without you expecting it? Suddenly you feel, okay, now I'm at home. Now I can help other people. If they ask me where something is, I might know, or I might have some idea of how the system works. Did you find that was a surprise to you?
not so in probably when I first, I mean, I've realized this for a number of years, that it just takes some time. So no, I wouldn't say now it surprises me. It's almost an expectation that it's going to take a little while. If we move again, and there's no guarantee that we're staying here in Vienna permanently, that we'll go through this again, right? Wherever we land next, and it's part of the process now, I guess. Is so. Now I expect, I guess now it's known, right? So it's not so scary. I have one of my younger daughter is just finished university in Cardiff, and is now trying to figure out where her next life stop will be. And yet I think this is one of the things that that she doesn't know where she's going to be, and she doesn't know anybody. It's likely to be in the UK. She doesn't know where. She doesn't want to go to London, but where, that's a little scary, right?
Yeah, it's scary at the beginning. I think you really have to dig into that kind of feeling. It is scary. It will be scary. All new things will be scary. And I think what I really like to do is, to really dig into that feeling and really appreciate that feeling for what it is, just accept that it is there, because you just have to look on the other side, because there's something behind the curtain that you really want, and it's worth it to try new things. I completely understand. For example, my family all of my family, my mom, my dad, they grew up in that, in this area. They always stayed there, and they are happy with that, and I think that's great. And I love coming home and just just spending time with them, and to get that kind of sense and feeling from them that they're really happy there, and they really, at the beginning, I remember when I told them that I wanted to leave, they were not too happy, because of course it's your family, you want to keep them together, you're going to miss them, and it's scary too. I can only imagine how it will be when I have kids one day and they will leave the house. But just I think the way things go, and it doesn't mean that you don't see each other again, of course it's just going to be different. But thankfully we have, technology is really advanced nowadays, and we can always pick up the phone and talk to each other. But of course, nothing compares to just really coming home, hugging them, to be there physically with each other. It's just a completely different thing, and nothing compares to that. But yeah, it's just, I think everybody, for everyone, home is something, can mean something different. And it's just very, very nice to share these kind of experiences and to appreciate, and to let other people have their way of living. And I think that's really interesting, because at the end of the day, we are all like humanity. We're all connected with each other, we're all the same. So in the end, we're all human. And yeah, I think that's great.
Yeah. Michael, did you want to go? Can I go quickly?
Yes,
So
go ahead.
okay. So what I found interesting is you're talking about humanity and how we're all the same. And I think in the work that I do with refugees in Kakuma, that for me is probably the big thing that I find quite disturbing is to try and put myself in their position of having been forced to leave your home and then to make a new home in a very, very harsh environment. And I find it really interesting as well from a sort of psychological perspective to look at what makes their home. They tend to connect with people who can speak their language and who has a similar cultural background. So even within a camp of 200,000 people, they still tend to group together. And yet there's a lot less conflict than one would expect with other groups. And so because they have to get along. And I find that I find it really interesting how certain groups actually connect better than others, and it's often to do with the perspective of the roles in a family. So people who who have quite a high level of respect for the mother in the family, for example, they would then connect with other groups who have similar views on how the family is connected. And in a way, I mean, that is obviously a home thing as well. So they're creating these new homes together and making a safe space yet again. The other quick thing that I wanted to say was it's quite interesting how the food system works there. And if you again, home and food is very strongly connected. But what happens is that people who come in as individuals often form small little family groups, not real ones, but they make up their own little families, and so that they can share in food rations. And so there's all sorts of very interesting social interactions and sort of almost contracts that they make. Informal but very strong. And I find it interesting that people who come there, some of them have lost everything, lost everyone, and yet they make little families and that's their home. And many people are pretty happy despite the extreme conditions. And it's because of that connection that they make with other people. Okay, I hand over, Michael.
Well, I want to maybe take a little bit, because I think, Mike, you put a question in the chat. Home and identity. To address, yeah, absolutely. I think that, you know, if I take myself, this is a little bit, again, sort of humorous, but you know, growing up in Canada, I have a unique characteristic in that I have 3 passports. They're all the same name as on all 3. Yeah, which is good. Well, if I didn't, then I probably wouldn't tell you that part. But you know, I have a Canadian passport, an American, and an Irish passport, which has been very convenient for being able to work in different places legally and all that sort of jazz. But you know, over the years, people have asked me, particularly because I've actually lived longer in the U.S. than I lived in Canada at this point, and people would say, "Are you American or are you Canadian?" And even here now, I identify myself as a Canadian. And I used to, the sort of the joke was, well, you know, I have no hard feelings at all with regards to the United States. I very much love, you know, like the country, enjoy the people and all that sort of stuff. But if it came to playing hockey in the Olympics, there was no question as to who I would be rooting for, right? So I guess at my root, I'm a Canadian. That's where I grew up, and that, so from that element of saying, okay, my identity, yeah, I would identify as a Canadian as compared to an American. I mean, I'm Irish by heritage, but I don't otherwise put that as a you know, as a key identity element per se for myself. But it is interesting. I mean, I guess, Elsa, you know, sort of throwing the ball to you, in your opening remarks, your opening comment, you said, yeah, you've lived in Australia for 25 years. but you very much identify as an African versus your adopted home at this point. That's an interesting. So, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. I think Africa is probably just one of those places where once you've lived there for a significant period, I don't think you get it out of your blood. It's so different from such a, how can I put it? It's just such a strong connection. It's a real earth connection. And when you get back there, it's just, the light is different, the vegetation is different, the animals are different. It's a very, very strong connection. What did you find with going to America? I would be very interested in hearing your experience, Jana, in terms of just what it looks like. It's so different from where you came from. Did that sort of jar a bit?
You mean moving from or leaving Germany and moving to the United States?
Yes.
Oh, well, it was a great experience. I've been really young, and looking back, I've been very naive. I just wanted to leave the small town and go to the big city, kind of like that. So it kind of feels like the typical cliche. And getting with there, living this life, was just an amazing experience, and I really enjoyed it. And I think what made it so enjoyable for me was just, my general mindset, because I was ready, I was open, to have the full experience, or get the full experience out of it. And
Where in the U.S. did you live?
I lived in New York, upstate, for 1 year, and then a couple more months, almost a full year in San Francisco. And
so what? Sorry, this is a New York thing. What do you consider upstate?
It was Newport, it was close to Poughkeepsie, if that says something to you.
Okay, so that's not really upstate. Upstate is Rochester.
They've told me upstate. It's been 1.5 hours from the city with the bus, so
Yeah.
so a little bit upstate.
Yeah.
Not okay. Yeah, no, it was nice. I mean, I really can't complain about the experience at all. It was just amazing. But I mean, I figured out, after this, I figured out, because, when I left Germany, I left with the, in my mind, I was ready to completely move there. I wanted to, have a life there and stay there. And after these 2 years, I actually realized I actually don't want that. Of course, it formed my identity in some kind of way, but I also felt I could not fully connect to what I intentionally thought I would, So it kind of left me a little bit lost at this point, which was good because, I think we're human. We're always searching. We're always searching for identity. We're always trying to be better, and just trying to find our place in the world and what it is all about. I guess that's this question that we all have inside of us, what's life about, and just going through this whole process made me realize I wanted to move on, and coming to Austria was not necessarily the country I wanted to live, but it had its advantages, so this is intentionally why I moved to Austria. And now I'm at a point again, I realized Austria is also not the country, but it's at some point I said it doesn't really matter where I am in the world, it doesn't really matter, because I can do exactly what I want to do, and I can work on myself and be better, and it doesn't really matter where I am in the end, but of course, like building up a home, for example, South Africa is like a country like I would be really interested in living and going to and living there, because I think it's just a beautiful country and the culture is really great. So, But I see myself as a traveler, you know, honestly. I just like to go around, and I can make my home anywhere in the world. So that's a big part of my identity, I think. So yeah.
Do you think you'll end back up in a rural spot at any point?
Maybe, yeah, maybe. Why not? You know, I think it could be possible, you know, because I have such a strong connection, you know, like it's been really great, and you know, I've had great experience. Right now I could not imagine it, you know, but for later on, for having kids, raising kids, yeah, definitely, for sure. I think it's really great.
One of the questions Mike was asked is whether moving is to cognitively change one's identity, maybe. And I think yes. One thing for me was that as a South African, we were for a long time sort of the pariahs of the world, and quite deservedly. So I'm not saying that was unfair, but once you move, you actually find now you're taking on that role of defending certain things. And I could never defend any of the things that were done to people that, you know, that I didn't agree with. And there wasn't a lot that happened that I agreed with. But you find that, okay, now you're now in a position where you actually have to talk about this. You can't just move away and take no responsibility. So you end up talking about things. Jana said, oh, she doesn't want to talk about politics now. But you get forced to if you're moving away. And I think you also forced, and this is where the cognitive change comes in, is you're actually forced to think very hard about it, whereas you could just have gone, I don't agree with it, and I'm now leaving in any case, so it's not my problem. One big thing for me was that it became a bigger problem for me in a way, and I'm working non-stop now with people in Africa, even though I'm living in Australia. And that was a decision that actually, now that I have the distance, I have the emotional energy, mostly, not always, but I have the emotional energy and the resources to put back into that continent. And yes, it's very much a cognitive, it's very much a decision that is my identity, is that I still care very much about Africa, and I'm still an African. So it's partly my job to help do something about the issues.
Yeah.
If that's the kind of question or that's the kind of answer you expected, yes. How do you feel in terms of Mike, how do you feel about America in that sense, and Canada? You know, there's not a very clear record there either. And do you feel that once you've moved away, you still engage with those issues?
I mean, I think lately you have. I mean, it's certainly with things like the Pope's current visit to Canada and around the Indigenous populations and some of the residential schools and things of that nature. And you know, the U.S. I don't believe they had the similar construct of this idea of residential schools, but certainly the U.S.'s treatment of the Native peoples has not been particularly good in any stretch of the imagination. Yeah, I do. I won't say that, you know, probably because, you know, professionally I am not immersed in it in the same way as you are, but certainly from a faith-based or whatever, you know, looking at some of this stuff. I have a sister who actually did teach at one of those schools in, you know, in British Columbia, in Prince George, British Columbia, for a year, right? And she was with a group of teachers, and she was teaching, you know, it was, I forget, grade school of some sort. Obviously, she never mentioned any of the behaviors that are in the press, and that certainly was not anything that she would have ever condoned. I think she would never have actually participated if she knew that was the reputation of the schools at that time. You know, this is going back into probably the late 80s, early 90s is when she was out there. But Yeah, it does. It's a complicated issue though as well, and it's not, you know. So the treatment is absolutely wrong. But the other element that I also look at is that time was also very different, right? You know, certainly some of the resident. I don't know how. I don't know enough about the actual real details of the residential schools in Canada specifically, as to, with all the deaths, did they really, was there a period of time where it started to change, you know, or is that really from the beginning, the first half of the 20th century, or up to the 60s, 50s, or I know the last residential schools closed in the 90s. Was it happening all the way up to the point that I just don't know. But I guess the other part that I don't condone the practice. I don't condone the behavior. I don't support it in any stretch of imagination. But I also look at things from a historical perspective of, we should judge things harshly where behaviors were bad, but also the world was a very different place. And so there is an element of, or for myself, is that I don't excuse the behavior, but I also, you know, some of the stuff, it's like I will be maybe more on the fence is maybe is where I land. You know, there are certain things that. Okay, sorry. I'll stop blabbing. You go ahead. Yep.
No, well, that's okay. I'm curious in terms of the question that Michael asked about cognitively changing your identity. So when you move, as I said, for me, it was actually, part of it was also to get away from that burden of the guilt. Even though you didn't do the things yourself, you felt, I want to get away from this so that I can, without that burden, now make my decisions and move forward. And I found that the burden followed me, and I'm still paying for things that I didn't do. But it's fine because I'm actually enjoying doing that.
I have not found that. No, and it's probably different because, you know, I think historically, or looking back, Canada, as being my I like to joke, mostly harmless, right? Most people in the world don't have you know, certainly recently some of the stuff, yes, but otherwise, you know, particularly when you are, you know, living beside the United States, a lot of people hate the United States. Canada, mostly harmless, right? So I can't say that I had a thing where I wanted to distance myself. Certainly moving has absolutely changed my identity, right? I think living in a different area, in a different culture, and you know, and particularly moving to the United States, because most, sorry, Mike, but we've had this conversation. Most Americans are so completely oblivious as to the rest of the world. And they look at Canada being the, it's just like the 51st state. Oh, no, it isn't. There are a lot of similarities, but there are absolutely differences, right?
And so, but you empower yourself, as Mike says, you basically empower yourself by making a move, and it's a basically character growth that you can, through distance and through geography, basically, you can change who you are. You can't change the deepest, you know, innermost things, but you can expose yourself, your whole frame of reference changes. And so, Jana, how do you feel about that?
I think this I've been thinking about so many things at the same time. I have to bring some order into my thoughts. About identity and the country you're from. I mean, I'm from Germany. What do you think people will say? Mostly the first thing they bring up, you know, is the really bad history Germany has with Hitler and everything, you know. And I think it's really difficult, you know, because of course these crimes are just so bad, you know, and I do not feel at all that has any part of it, you know. I think for us as human beings, it's very, very important to talk about what happened in the past, to talk about what happened, you know, to talk about history in order to learn from our mistakes, you know, so that it won't happen again. But I feel like what we're doing is not at all that, because I feel like we're putting these labels on each other and we're just looking at all the differences. And we're actually completely missing the point, because it's not about our differences. It's not about, you know, we should not constantly talk about all the bad things, rather focus on the good things, you know, and just learn from the history that we have. It's very difficult, you know, because most people, or sometimes people just do not think it through, you know. They just throw something at you and they hear you're from Germany and then immediately they connect it, and you cannot even, you know, be mad at that or say nothing, you know. But I rather you know, like generally just focus on the good thing, if you can say it like that, and thinking about different cultures and different identities, you know. For example, I've been connected to this. I've been thinking about all the countries I traveled to, and then all the countries I lived in, you know, and then coming to one place, coming to my home, which is right now in Vienna, you know, and just looking around in my apartment. There's little pieces that I picked up from each country that meant something to me and that remind me, you know. For example, I have a picture that a guy that was a homeless guy in San Francisco, and he drew it for me. And I always have this picture, you know. Everywhere I move, I take this picture, you know. And everybody's, because, you know, it's not the nicest thing in the world. It's not like an expensive piece of art, but it means the world to me, you know. And I take it everywhere. Doesn't matter where I move, I bring this picture. And I had a lot of issues with my roommates because they were like, no, we can't have this. And I'm like, I don't care, but this is gonna go in, you know, because this gives me the feeling of home. And I think it's really, of course, you cannot put your identity. We always try, you know, to have especially like our culture, we always try to have the new stuff and everything has to be new. But like, what is this couch gonna say about me? You know, it's not gonna say nothing about me. But these little things, like this picture that this guy drew for me, like this is meaningful for me, you know. The rest I don't really care about. And I also don't care about all the labels, you know. Like, I think we should just celebrate our differences instead of, you know, putting each other down. So I think there's a really big misconception. And yeah, these kind of been my thoughts on this topic.
So I have a question.
Mhm.
It's a little bit lighter, right? And it's a game I play in airports, and it's identifying people by the way where they're from, by how they dress.
I love it. That's something we would definitely play when we would travel together. Yeah,
And it's interesting because Germans dress a particular way.
Mhm.
Americans and Brits are extreme comfort. Tracksuits for the Brits, you know, or, you know, very comfortable loose clothing.
Mhm.
It's just sort of a fun thing if you sort of when you're sitting in an airport and looking at the Germans there, and again outdoor clothes, like hiking boots, yeah, right, or a purple blazer or purple jacket with a blue shirt and a very different colors. Italians wear bowling shoes.
Most definitely, yeah.
Yeah,
They always dress really well. Also the
yeah,
film.
yeah, and dressed very well, very stylish. Yeah,
We really got it together. Yeah, we have
Yeah.
to see that
Yeah.
definitely. It's really funny. Like even if I think of my own like history of is when I came from San Francisco. I remember I came with 3 suitcases and I was wearing these silver glitter leggings. I was wearing Jordans with gold, and I was wearing a San Francisco Warriors jacket, And this is how I came. So we flew to the airport in Vienna, and everybody was like, "What the heck?" And I felt it. I was like, I do not care, because I'm doing what I want, and I'm gonna wear the craziest outfit, that you've ever seen, and I'm gonna wear it with confidence, So I don't care about your opinion. And yeah, after a year, I think, or so, yeah, I think after a year or something like that, I was looking exactly like the typical Austrian, with the Louis Vuitton bag and the trench coat, and like all that unnecessary stuff you really don't need, but I enjoy doing it. I just like to wear what I want to wear and how I feel like, and if tomorrow I want to wear a dress, that's cool, and if the day after I want to wear a sweater, that's fine as well. Like I'm just trying to go with the flow and actually really enjoy traveling to different countries and kind of I don't want to say cultural appropriation, of course not, but kind of appropriate some of the things. Like I don't think it's wrong, because I'm trying to celebrate other cultures, and it's really fun to combine different things. I don't see nothing wrong with that, as long as you're respectful, and you have respect for the culture and you actually are interested in learning. I think that's what it is all about, because we should share these things with each other. That's what they're there for. But yeah, it's really fun to look at people and try to figure out where they're from. I would have guessed you would have had an easy game with me, especially the college. No question.
No, I thank you first off, Mike, for inviting me to participate. This has been a lot of fun. It's caused me to think on certain things that, in certain ways that reality is I probably wouldn't have. So I think I've really enjoyed the conversation. Whether it was just reflecting on, how when I fly back to Canada or the US, just the sensation or the impression of familiarity is probably and how familiarity brings an element of home. So it's good. I've enjoyed meeting both Jana and Elsa in the conversation and exchanging different thoughts. So I'm very appreciative. It's put a few things there to noodle on. I appreciate it. So I will pass it to Jana. I'll pass it to you next.
Yes, I can just say the same thing. It's always been great, Mike. Thank you for having me. It's been really great meeting Elsa and Michael and sharing our views on this topic. I always learn a new thing, and I love to learn new things, and just great having a conversation with you, getting to know you. And it kind of feels like home, right? I mean, the creation of a home is one of the, or if not the most meaningful activity, one of the most meaningful activity. And just talking to Mike, talking to you as well, just feels like home. And sometimes we just have to go back home to remember who we are. And yeah, I think it's been really great, really valuable, and can't wait till next time.
Yes. Well, it's been lovely to meet you both, and really good to connect with Mike again. We haven't been speaking often, and we should, because I always learn something. And as Jana says, just connecting with like-minded people, that already feels like home.
Yeah.
So I would love to stay in touch with you all.
Definitely. It's good.
Maybe if I can ask you a follow-up question, then I really promise to go ahead and end this session. Very often people struggle in understanding some of the things that we have done. In going back to the example, Jana, that you brought from, especially from your family, I have a similar one where in my case, they didn't even leave Southern California. I was the only one who decided to truly leave the nest. What message do we bring these people who struggle in understanding those things that we have done so far, because it is so far from their reality? Does anybody have any tips? And I'd leave it open to the stage.
Just do it.
Indeed.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's like describing a color to a blind person, right? Until you actually do it and experience something completely different, I don't. I suppose you can. It's like the saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. But there is the follow-on sentence of but you can salt the oats, right? You can create the compelling story or event that causes people to potentially venture out of the nest. So maybe that's the thing, is to, or invite them over. Invite them to come visit you. Right. Whether it's particularly if it's family members, maybe that's the way, versus necessarily other people, that don't have the same familial strength or bond.
Yeah, just one more thing, and that's that often the conflicts in the world tend to arise from people seeing or fearing the other. And if you never get to know the other, then you wouldn't know who they are and that they're just like us.
Yep.
Everyone. Same thing.